Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Agents Unleashed podcast, the show that helps you to sort the signal from the noise in the fast-paced world of agentic AI. On this week's show, we take a look at a guest post on the Ethereum X account written by some influential developers at Base, Kevin LeFew and Lincoln Murr. Then we look at the world of science, where AI has been doing some novel experiments in physics, giving us a preview of a world where AI drives real scientific discovery. And I'll tell you what all of this means for the world of user-owned AI. I'm your host, Thomas Maybrier, and I'm a producer at Valerie, one of the core contributors to Olas. If you haven't heard of Olas or you haven't heard of Agents Unleashed, let me quickly take a moment to tell you a little bit about both. So, Olas is the best way for anyone to own and monetize an AI agent, and that includes people just like you. You can learn more about how to do that at olas.network. And Agents Unleashed isn't just a podcast, it's also the premier event series for people interested in agentic AI. Events have been held all over the world with thousands of in-person attendees and more than 100 different speakers and presenters. The next event has just been announced. It'll be held October 1st in Singapore. You can find more details about this event and replays of previous events at olas.network/agents-unleashed. Or just check out the description box for the show notes for these links and links to all of the resources and stories that we're going to talk about today. This episode is sponsored by Sigil. Sigil is one of the top performing crypto hedge funds worldwide. It's been run by crypto natives since 2018. You can learn more at www.sigilfund.com. Okay, so we'll start the show today with a look at what's happening in the world of Ethereum. A recent guest thread that went up on the Ethereum X account, written by developers from Coinbase, lays out a vision for how and why autonomous AI should make use of the protocol, specifically taking advantage of the base HTTP X402 standard that we covered on episode 4 of the show. Check out the description box or the show notes for a link to that. So in the thread, they use a vending machine analogy where an AI agent would make a request, an off-chain server would reply with code 402, which is payment required, giving the price and how to pay. In the example, they suggest payment via USDC. Then the agent would sign a transfer with authorization, as described in Ethereum Proposal 3009. It would retry the call, and then the server would complete the payment on-chain, returning whatever the desired result is. So instead of a bag of chips from the vending machine, the AI agent would get an AI generation, access to gated content, or something like that. This is a clean way of adding payments to an API without reinventing the wheel, but also making use of Ethereum's capabilities in a clever way. Now, in the thread, they do say that agents have always been broke, that they have no access to money, that they're unable to pay for things like API calls, storage, inference, model context protocol access, without having a human-in-the-loop configuration. Well, if you've been paying attention to the Olas ecosystem, you know this is actually not true. And you can look at the history of the Olas protocol, where agents have been active since summer of 2022, and where since the summer of 2023, the Mech Marketplace has been live. Here you have AI agents autonomously transacting with each other, doing things like paying for inference and so on. And we'll touch a little bit more on these different use cases a bit later. But setting that aside for now, there's still some very interesting ideas in the thread, like having an LLM pay for model inference, agents paying for context for task optimization, or apps streaming stablecoins for permanent storage. There's a few others, but we don't have time to look at all of them today. Let's unpack some of these and see how they fit into the existing Olas ecosystem. Well, in point of fact, Olas actually does much of this today. We'll start with agents paying each other in a marketplace. Well, the Mech Marketplace allows agents to discover other agents called mechs and then hire them for their skills for things like prediction, media generation, access to data, and similar tasks. Then they can settle their payments on-chain. All of this takes place with no API keys, just cryptographic signatures, to quote the thread. There's also a pay-per-task flow where requesting agents post a job and then deposit their fees. The delivering agents, the so-called mechs, fulfill those tasks off-chain and then deliver the results on-chain. Payment models for this include the native Olas token, but also a Nevermind subscription model. Agent-to-agent interactions are already the majority of activity in the Olas ecosystem by a massive margin. Looking at the stats, we have more than 9 million transactions by autonomous AI agents, and 7.2 million of those are so-called agent-to-agent transactions. The value of micropayments between these agents is in the tens of thousands of dollars and rising every day. In the diagram, you can see both some recent figures and get a sense of how activity in the ecosystem is currently taking place. Olas also offers some coordination extras. There's an on-chain registry for discovery. The marketplace supports delivery guarantees like a reputation or a takeover mechanism, and staking offers incentivization and coordination on the supply side. All of this gives you the potential for much more than just a pay this API model. So what does X402 add, and why is this thread potentially still quite a big deal? Well, it's not creating a new payment rail. It's having a sane HTTP native standard for agent-to-agent payments. HTTP has already proven itself. It's how the modern web has worked for decades. And the standardization of something that already works makes sense. The request-response model works great in the Mech Marketplace, so that standardization reaching into other ecosystems could be quite valuable. It's worth pointing out here that I'm talking about HTTP X402 because that's what the thread is about, but that's just one of several different options. There's also H402 and other projects exploring a similar pattern. The goal here isn't to say that we should pick a tribe, but ideally to converge on a clean abstraction where we could build broad compatibility with the long-term goal of scale. So how do these ideas fit together? Well, you could imagine Olas for agent-native marketplaces, where it's easy for agents to discover and consume services and then handle the on-chain task coordination, and then using X402 to light up the rest of the web with per-call machine payments. Your Olas agents or mechs can both consume these X402 APIs and expose their own endpoints if you wanted Web 2 services to be able to pay or hire them. Having a unified payment structure like this one that's simple and runs on existing rails makes scaling access easier. Olas also has the ability to bootstrap agent economies through staking, since a marketplace requires both demand and supply to function. Now, what about folding into other ecosystems? Well, the thread name checks Protea for generative media, Firecrawl for web search, and Nanar for Farcaster social context, just to name a few, illustrating how AI agents could chain together services. A couple of thoughts to close us out here. Well, first, it's very encouraging to see the Ethereum Foundation, by way of the X account, getting behind this explicit vision of autonomous agents using the chain. And secondly, it's even better that Olas agents and the Mech Marketplace already serve many of the use cases that are described. Autonomous AI agents on chain are going to be ubiquitous, and we can look at projects like Olas Predict, Olas Optimus on Perl for proof that agent-to-agent transactions aren't just feasible, they can be fast, effective, and flexible, just like the thread describes. Today's show is sponsored by Sigil Fund, a top-performing regulated crypto hedge fund. Since 2018, Sigil has been delivering above-average performance via smart exposure to crypto markets. Now, after 4 years of private testing, they're opening up a new strategy to qualified investors, Sigil Stable. Sigil Stable focuses on yield farming and market-neutral strategies to provide returns uncorrelated with market prices, taking away the stress of crypto volatility. All of this comes with daily NAV reporting for investors and no lockup on the investment. Visit www.sigilfund.com to learn more. All right, back to the show. Now, a quick palate cleanse from crypto to the cosmos. Wired magazine, reprinting a story from Quanta, reported that researchers used AI to search the design space of LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. The AI suggested a non-intuitive optical layout that on paper would make LIGO 10 to 15% more sensitive, with humans still steering and sanity checking throughout. So the design of LIGO, it's a facility with two 4-kilometer arms that have lasers that bounce back and forth, measuring a proton's width when a gravitational wave passes. As a system, it's already highly optimized after decades of work. So what did the AI actually do here? Well, it proposed adding a 3-kilometer ring between LIGO's main interferometer and the detector readout to recirculate light to suppress quantum noise. The team spent months unpacking why this would work and traced the idea back to some theoretical principles first explored by Russian physicists decades ago. Important to note here, this is a design result. It's not a live upgrade to an existing system, but when the researchers looked at the results, they looked alien, so they simplified them and then interpreted the AI's design so that they could justify the physics, which is a pattern here where the AI explores the design wilderness and then humans prune, explain, and validate that idea. The underlying study was called Digital Discovery of Interferometric Gravitational Wave Detectors, and it assembled 50 of the top-performing designs into a detector zoo. In the journal version, the authors note that some future detector topologies could, under assumptions, yield more than 10x sensitivity and more than 50x observable volume on top of the LIGO's 10 to 15% figure. This fits a broader trend where AI or algorithms propose non-obvious experiments that humans can then justify and put into practice. We can look at some earlier science for something similar where algorithmic exploration proposes weird but effective designs and then humans interpret, test, and implement them afterwards. The evolved antennas that use natural selection-inspired genetic algorithms to find optimal designs come to mind here. Here's an example of an evolved antenna developed by NASA that actually flew in space on the ST-5 mission in 2006. Using our imagination, one could envision an Olas-based ownable agent that could run a discovery loop for you. It would search designs, draft reports, and then post its results to markets with provenance. Now, of course, this is speculative. It's not a claim about the current study, but it's something to get you thinking. One more context point, again from the world of Web3. Platforms like OpenLedger are proposing specialized models with on-chain attribution, so the people who supply the niche data sets that actually make those models smart could share in the value when agents use them. If you're building a model, say for interferometer design or quantum noise simulation, you could imagine a data set that collects the right optics data, a fine-tuned model available through the Mech Marketplace, and then agents that pay per simulation run. The provenance would be recorded, the contributors could get credited, and the best ideas could be auctioned for license on-chain. That's the same incentive loop that we want to see around AI-driven discovery. For more on this, I'd recommend checking out this talk from Agents Unleashed in Cannes given by Ram at OpenLedger. You can find the link to that in the description box or the show notes wherever you get the podcast. Wrapping it all up, here's a through line for you to think about. When agents can pay, coordinate, cite their sources, they can become real economic and scientific actors. X402 and EIP 3009 could standardize a type of interaction that's already happening in the Olas Mech Marketplace, where agents hire other agents and chain their skills and results together into larger outcomes. The physics story shows us that AI doesn't just have the capacities to speed up our work in science, it could open up the design space and surface non-intuitive wins that humans can then verify. And OpenLedger points to a model ecosystem where the people who supply the niche data behind specialized models can be credited and paid. Put it all together and you get a future of ownable agents that can commission experiments, make new discoveries, settle bills, and route rewards, all while minimizing trust and providing end users with a stake and a chance at ownership of the agentic future. All right, that's all I have for you today. Before we go, however, I'd like to ask you for two things. One is to help me grow the show with a like, a comment, a rating, a review, wherever you get the show. And secondly, I'd like to invite you to take part in our listener survey. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be collecting feedback from listeners of the show, and one lucky winner could win a prize of 500 Olas tokens, subject to some terms and conditions. You can find a link to take the survey in the description box on YouTube or the show notes on your podcast platform of choice. All right, this has been the Agents Unleashed podcast. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.